press that red button. Have you pressed it?
You know you don't.
We're on, are we?
Yeah, we're on.
I could take a bit of... No, you've got to move it along yourself.
No, it's okay. Thanks very much for coming, by the way, everybody.
Yeah. I could take a bit of it.
We're here to launch 2 books today, both in their different ways about discrimination. Michael O'Leary's doctoral dissertation, the wonderful Wednesday's Women, and my book, which is also about discrimination. His one is about discrimination against women by the male literary power structure between 1945 and 1970. Made life very difficult for women. I had experience directly of this when I published this book by Peggy Dunstan, an Auckland poet and friend of mine. And she told me that for many years she couldn't get published, so she changed her name to Patrick Dunstan.
And got published?
In order to get it published. That was the context that she grew up in New Zealand.
What year was that?
In about 40 or 50 years ago. A long time ago. She's just died a couple of years ago. My book is about another kind of discrimination, which is class and race. Okay, mine is about the first 6 years of colonisation in New Zealand, well, in the Hutt Valley, in the Promised Land. That's the title of the Hutt Valley. Hello, here we go. Welcome, just in time. I'm just introducing things. Hi. The discrimination started, of course, on the boat out. The ruling classes were in the cabin class, and down below in steerage were the lower classes. And my narrator is one of the lower classes, a Scottish lad, whose father's an ex-convict who's bringing him to the Promised Land. Now, like John Steinbeck's East of Eden, there are quite a lot of kind of biblical parallels here. Not quite as extreme as his book. I have 2 innocent Abels rather than a Cain and Abel. They raise a little bit of Cain, but most of the time they are innocents in this power play that's going on in the development, which starts off reasonably benign in the Hutt Valley, Heratonga as it was called by the Maori. Both Maori and Pakeha farmers did very well in a fertile Garden of Eden, which had 13 feet of topsoil, according to Charles Heafys, who was the early explorer surveyor, who comes into the story. A lot of the characters, real-life characters and incidents are in the story. But it's basically a recreation of those 1840s when these Christian colonists arrived, and the first thing they did was bang the Bible on the beach at the Tony. And there are other kinds of biblical references in the... there's a sort of Tower of Babel of different accents. The Scottish kid can't understand the Kentish folk, and they can't understand the Yorkies, and the Corns, the Cornish people, and the Cockneys. In this Tower of Babel, they also faced the dilemmas of fire and flood and drowning, which was called in those days the New Zealand disease, the New Zealand death, and probably still should be. There are other biblical parallels, but I won't belabor them because it's mainly a story about this incident of the Battle of Boulcott Farm, which was provoked by Governor Grey, the new governor, sending in the troops to sort out that lust for land which the cooperative farmers, I'm afraid, didn't stick to. And we ended up with tensions on both sides and a pa built on one side of the Heratonga River and a Pakeha pa or fortress on the other. And once the troops were sent in, the Battle of Boulcott Farm took place. And my narrator's involved in all of this is a carter who is friendly with this Maori kid who they both explore the Garden of Eden while it's still a beautiful forested area. And this is where Michael comes into the picture, because I told him I didn't want to use the original engraving, which is a ferocious one of a super-sized Maori warrior and this tiny little bugler boy. I said, would you do a reinterpretation for me? And he has. And what's interesting to me about Michael's talents as an artist, you know, he published a book of his paintings earlier this year, is that his sense of colour is very vibrant, and he emphasised the forests and the water and the marae, the more benign aspects of the Garden of Eden, with this central figure of the warrior and the bugler boy. And there it is on the cover. And both of us discovered that Michael had, this delighted both of us, had achieved, through his own imagination, something rather similar to the 1880s painted marae, of which only one survives. There was a period when carving had died out almost, and painted maraes were the way in which maraes were decorated in the 1880s. And the one at Rongapai, well worth visiting near Gisborne if you haven't been there. And if you look at this is an illustration from a book I did on landmark buildings around New Zealand. And the eye sockets of the house are very similar. The same sort of vibrant colours. Anyway, that was delightful. So my story is about the lead up to the Battle of Boulcott Farm and the aftermath when Grey's forces pursued Rangihaiata's forces over to Pauatanui, where there was a pa that they attacked. And the only naval engagement in New Zealand history was on the Parramatta Inlet between Maori warriors with their canoes and muskets and what was called McGill's blanket navy, which was a whaleboat with blankets put around inside to protect the sailors from the muskets when they attacked the Maori power. My narrator is involved in all of this and gets caught up in the situation where Grey decides to kidnap Turapraha. All this happened. And also six originally Maori rebels, as they were called, he's going to make an example by sending to Tasmania as convicts. And that story is told by Witi Ihimera in the Trowena Sea, a real story. My story basically is about they hanged one of these so-called Maori rebels, a farmer from the Hutt Valley, who had nothing to do with the fighting, called Martin Luther, incidentally. He was a Christian, and not very Christian on the part of Grey. And the others were sent to Tasmania. But Michael ends with the prison in Wellington Harbour in an attempt to rescue these people. Michael, in his book Wednesday's Women, Michael specialises as a Paikokariki citizen in things that start with P. He's a painter, he's a publisher, he's a performer and poet, as we saw here a year ago when he developed his CD, Fences Fall, that wonderful CD, with local artists performing his poems. It was a grand occasion here, a much bigger occasion. But there's another P to his bio, and that is
Puka Puka.
Fid. Oh, he's Puka Puka as well. He's a PhD. This gentleman did his PhD thesis on the discrimination against women writers and artists too. And he wanted to convert it into a book. And I've worked with Michael before, and it's always a very, shall we say, inspiring and agreeable process. On this occasion I said, what are we going to have as a title? We've got to jazz it up because academic titles tend to be rather long. I said, what kind of woe did women experience? He said, woe, yeah. Wednesday's Child, Robin Hyde is one of the people in it, as is Jackie Baxter and Nell Scanlon, famous writers, but they had a terrible time getting published. So Wednesday's Women was Michael's idea for the title, and I said, what about an artist for the cover? He said, well, it's obvious, Anne McCann, and there it is. And so we had a very harmonious time producing this book, and it's only proper, I think, that the academic supervisors of his PhD should launch this book. So we're going to have Alison and Prue. I think with Alison first, is that right?
Yeah, go first. It's wonderful to have
to launch this book.
We had most of our supervisions, of course, at Paikokariki, because all three of us lived here.
Just press the button.